here we go. So when you're doing completing the square, the only time you can use completing the square is when A is 1. Okay? So remember, we have solve by graphing, solve by factoring, solve by square root, or solve using the quadratic, not the quadratic, but the completing the square. Completing the square and square root only works if if A is 1. So the first thing that we have to do is get rid of the A. So in order to get rid of the A, we have to divide everything by the A, which is 3. So we're going to divide everything in the problem by 3. So that's the first thing. Okay. So 3x squared divided by 3 leaves me with x squared. 10 divided by 3 leaves me with 10/3. 8 divided by 3 leaves me with 8/3. And 0 divided by 3 leaves me with 0. Now, can we take the square root of 8/3 and get 10/3? Like square it, like can we take the square root, double it, and get 10/3? No. Now, yesterday, someone asked me, can we change it to a decimal? You can change it to a decimal if it's terminating. So if it comes out to be like 10.5, 7.25, 7.5. But if it comes out to a repeating decimal, you need to leave it as a fraction. So what we need to do is we need to get it into our completing the square. So we're going to rewrite it. I'm going to have x squared plus 10/3 x plus a blank equals, well, I need to move this 8/3 from the left-hand side, from this side of the equation, to this side. So if it was negative on this side, when I move it, it becomes positive. And now I need to figure out what's in the blank, okay? And you guys, I am encouraging you to use your calculators. So it's basically, what we're going to do is we're going to take 10/3. And if it's a fraction, you guys, we usually divide our number in half. Well, if it's a fraction, instead of dividing it by 2, we can multiply it by 1/2. And then square it. And that equals our C and our blank, okay? So whatever this answer is, we're going to put in our blank. So again, how did I get the 1/2? Because dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. And since I have a fraction, I'm just going to multiply it by 1/2. Well, 10 times 1 is 10. 3 times 2 is 6. So what I want to do is I actually want to reduce that fraction. So what is 10/6 reduced? 5/3. So I reduced my fraction. If you reduce it, the numbers will be a little bit better. Okay, so now I'm going to square it. And when you square it, you actually are going to do that. What's 5 squared? And what's 3 squared? So again, you guys, I reduced my fraction and then I squared the top and the bottom. So I squared the numerator and got 25. I squared the denominator and got 9. Now we got to figure out 8/3 plus 25/9. I'm going to show you how to do it in your calculator. So what I did was, I'm going to use this key right here. 8/3 plus 25/9. Well, I'm not going to leave it as 5 4/9. So I'm going to do second, that key, and I get 49/9. So why did I do that? that goes here. So 49 ninths goes here, not 49 fourths. Oh my goodness gracious. This becomes x, this is positive, and I take the square root, which is 5/3. And now I have my problem. So again, I added 8/3 and 25 ninths, and I got 49 ninths. Again, I added 8/3 plus 25 ninths, and I got 49 ninths. I took the square root of 25, that's how I got 5. I took the square root of 9, that's how I got 3. Now, now I've completed the square. Now what I need to do is use the square root method. And to use the square root method, I take the square root of both sides. And I'm left with x plus 5/3 equals plus or minus. Well, what is the square root of 49? What is the square root of 9? Sometimes, when we do these problems, our fractions actually end up having the same denominator, which is great, because then that way, you know you can add and subtract them and you don't need a calculator. So I'm going to use the method that someone in here yesterday asked me about. So I'm going to do x plus 5/3 equals the positive 7/3. And then I'm going to do the x plus 5/3 equals the negative 7/3. Now you don't have to do that. I want you to find a method that you feel most comfortable with. And then I'm going to subtract my 5/3 from both sides. I get x equals 7 minus 5 is 2/3. I'm going to subtract my 5/3 from both sides. I get x equals, well, negative 7 minus 5 is negative 12 over 3, which equals negative 4. So that is where my parabola crosses the x-axis. So if I was to graph this, I should see a point at negative 4, and I should see a point at 2/3 on the x-axis. Okay, you ready for the next one? The next one, we as a group had started. I need to videotape it, so I want to make sure I finish it, okay? So this is example number 9. Again, yesterday, what did we do? What did I have to do on this one? Divide by what? 2. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. Okay, so this becomes x squared plus 7x minus 8 equals 0. Can I take the square root of 8 and double it and get 7? No. So I got rid of the 2 because when you complete the square, your a has to be 1. So now I'm going to move the 8 to the other side. So I'm moving this 8, since it was negative and I put it over here, it becomes positive. Now what I need to do is take half of 7 and square it, and that becomes my C or my blank. Okay, it's both of them really. So 7 squared is, what is 7 squared? And what is 2 squared? If I put 49 fourths here, I have to put 49 fourths here. Now, 49 fourths comes out is a pretty decent number, right? If you divide it, you get a pretty good decimal. So if you want to try the decimal version, that's fine. I'm just going to stick with the I'm going to stick with the fraction because they're both perfect squares. So now I'm going to rewrite it as x plus this 7/2 squared equals, well, what is 8 plus 49/4? Well, it would be 32 over 4 because 32 divided by 4 is 8. So 32 plus 49 is 81/4. Again, this becomes, because it's a whole number, this would become 32 over 4. So 32 plus 49 is 81, and the 4 stays the same. Now what am I going to do? Did you say take the square root of both sides? If you said that, then you are correct. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. This becomes x plus 7/2 plus or minus. Well, what is the square root of 81? What is the square root of 4? Now we have two answers. X plus 7/2 equals positive 9/2. X plus 7/2 equals negative 9/2. So we're going to solve both of those. Okay. Now, you guys, some of the fractions can be really, really not great. Again, test it. If it comes out and you want to use a decimal, that's fine. Just make sure the decimal is not a repeating decimal, because you don't want to do that. So if it's a repeating decimal, you need to stick with a fraction. We could have changed this to a decimal, but you guys, you can see how 9/2 and 7/2 it worked out. Most of the time, your fractions are going to work out to have the same denominator, and you won't have to do a lot of making them the same denominator. When you first start out, like when you're completing the square, it probably will, but not when you go all the way through. There any questions over examples 8 or 9? We good?